Could Canada finally, after so many years, be getting a new pipeline? Well, a new memorandum of understanding between the government of Canada and the Alberta government could spell some positive economic news. Hello, I'm Adrienne Batra. With me are Lorrie Goldstein and Brian Lilley. So, a lot of reporting you've already done, Brian, on this memorandum of understanding. There's a lot of news in what happened today with Premier Smith and Prime Minister Carney, but the big news was, of course, that this MOU for a potential pipeline to get the bitumen up to the north coast of British Columbia is becoming a very real possibility.
This is a great deal between Alberta and the federal government. Look, I'm on the record. I don't think we should need these things. I think we should act like a grown-up country. I think it's ridiculous that the prime minister has to be involved in trying to get a pipeline approved. But as Premier Smith pointed out, this agreement addresses 7 of the 9 bad laws, as she calls them. They got most of everything that they asked for. The clean energy regulations will not be applying. The emissions cap is done now. We're going to start seeing investment flow into Alberta. It's been funny listening to so many of the reporters ask either Smith or Carney or others, well, the agreement says there has to be a private sector proponent of the pipeline. What if there isn't one? After this, there's going to be one. So this is a giant step in the right direction. It's where we should have been all along. Does it solve everything? No, but very good for Alberta, very good for Canada.
Lori, this is such a big deal because let's go back for the last over 10 years that we had a federal government under Justin Trudeau who did everything he possibly could to block pipelines, stop pipelines. We know that we have this ongoing issue about wanting to get our resources out to other markets, an Asian market that is desperate for our oil and gas resources. Trudeau stopped it and blocked it at every possible turn. So what does this say about Carney recognizing that that was not a good policy?
In actual fact, he's continuing the policy that Trudeau initially announced and never implemented, which is that Canada would use its oil and gas resources to fund the transition to green energy. In other words, you're going to make a lot of money from moving oil and natural gas all over the world. There's going to be a lot of taxes paid. The Liberal plan was to use those taxes to fund the decarbonization. And obviously there are elements of that here where it's conditional on carbon and capture storage being implemented in Alberta in a realistic way. So I agree with both of you. We basically called for this for a decade. Good for Mark Carney for, at least getting it on the agenda. This is a nation building project, unlike many of the others.
Yeah.
This will lower the tensions
Yes.
in Alberta. Better relations between Alberta, Danielle Smith, and the federal government are a positive because for so long, Albertans have felt, the majority of Albertans have felt Canada's a bad deal. Now, you can argue forever about whether that's, but that is the feeling. And the groundwork has changed. Polls show now that most Canadians, including in British Columbia and Quebec, where the governments are most opposed to, the transmission of fossil fuel energy, realize we're in a new world now. We have to find alternatives to the American market. Now, the two caveats here are that Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, has also said that there has to be provincial agreement on the pipelines, like where they go, and there has to be Indigenous agreement. So that's going to be where I think this could start to falter. But I think as we've all agreed, at least now the discussion is engaged. At least now we don't have this nonsensical idiocy from the previous Trudeau government that, as even Trudeau in his more sane moments said, any country would be crazy to keep its vast oil and natural gas resources in the ground and not profit from them because of all the good things that can happen from profit. So at least now the discussions engage. The discussions will be about getting a pipeline, to Tidewater, from there to Asian markets. So now we have a competitor to the United States. We don't have to sell our stuff to them at a discount. It's going to take time. It's going to take time, but at least we're on the path. Whereas before, we were spinning our wheels for a decade.
Brian, let's talk a little bit about some of those. Once the cameras are turned off and everyone goes back to their respective jurisdictions, the hard work has to move ahead
Yeah.
and get this deal done. But the province of British Columbia, where this is partially going to go through this pipeline, the premier there, David Eby, has been vehemently opposed to this. Is this one of those sorts of situations, though, where he's just going to have to get on board?
The Supreme Court's been clear. He doesn't have veto. So as much as he thinks he has some kind of veto power, even though Mark Carney's press release said that it will only be built in consultation with British Columbia and Indigenous, that doesn't mean that David Eby gets to say, no, you can't do this. The federal government has jurisdiction to give approval to this. And if they do, well, then the proponent can go ahead. So David Eby, though, he's offside of his own public. Support for a pipeline is, I believe it's 58% in British Columbia. Majority say, yeah, they back it. A minority oppose it. He's going to be facing a potential election soon. Is he going to go against this? Is he going to go against something that the whole country knows we need for our economic security? Probably not. It'd be interesting to see how the Conservatives react to this. I haven't seen anything yet. I'm sure something will be coming out soon. But they have to be concerned, because if this is implemented correctly, and Lorrie's right, there's a lot of things that could go wrong with the implementation. But if this is implemented correctly, this could hurt the Conservatives. Last election, the Liberals took 2 seats in the province of Alberta. That could go up to 4, 5, start chipping away at the Conservative dominance. I mean, I think they would still dominate most of the province. But if Carney's delivering, then yeah, there's ridings in Calgary and Edmonton that you could easily see flipping Liberal red. That has to be of concern for Pierre Poilievre and his team. But it's, how do you come out against it when Danielle Smith is so happy about everything in this? You mentioned the Pathways Project earlier, and I want to just say quickly that a little while ago, one of the bad laws that they're doing away with is the so-called greenwashing that made it illegal for companies to make claims about that they're more environmentally friendly, or that natural gas burns cleaner than oil does. Well, it does, lower emissions, but there was the potential. Pathways Alliance, I had a friend working there at the time when these things went through. They took down everything off their website because they were afraid of getting sued. They were afraid of being prosecuted over this. They're doing away with the ridiculousness of the last 10 years. Maybe not all of it, but a good chunk of it. It's a move in the right direction. Do I love that you have to build the carbon capture sequestration? No. Do I love the industrial carbon tax that Alberta has to implement at a higher rate? No. But it will get the projects moving. That's a good thing.
Well, let's have a listen to Premier Smith addressing some of these concerns.
The last 10 years have been an extremely difficult time for hundreds of thousands of Albertans and their families that directly or indirectly rely on and make their living from a strong and vibrant and growing Alberta oil and gas sector. These Albertans are mothers and fathers and young people working so hard to put food on the table, to pay for hockey and soccer fees, and to save for the down payment on their first home. These are also small business owners that too often have found themselves as well in their business working very hard to build due to a regulatory environment that has made it almost impossible for them to succeed. And more broadly, the last 10 years have left hundreds of thousands of Albertans skeptical and oftentimes questioning the long-term viability of our nation as we watched its deliberate phase-out of our province's most valuable asset, leaving it trapped and wasted in the vast oil sands of northern Alberta, and with it, innumerable lost investment opportunities and tens of thousands of lost jobs.
So, Lorrie, as we've seen, this is a very positive notion from Premier Smith, who, let's face it, has done battle with the central government for years now, trying to support her province to develop the oil and gas resources. this is by no means a done deal. We should not give that impression at all. This is a very important step in the right direction. But there are other political risks that Carney's taking with agreeing to this, with his own environment minister, with Stephen Guilbeault, who is adamantly opposed to that. Do you think any of those posturings from internal politics for Carney, does that going to sway one way or the other? Are they going to try to put more restrictions on Alberta before anything gets done?
Yeah, there was a story that Guilbeault might resign over this. He has now denied that.
Mhm.
He said he's not going to resign. Yeah, look, liberals who are expressing these concerns, they're fighting a war that's over. Time has moved on. We've realized that the international effort to lower emissions has been a massive failure. There are ways you can certainly lower emissions constructively, like having natural gas from Canada powering China, which uses coal. Because natural gas burns at half the carbon intensity of coal, it's one of the most effective ways in the world to lower emissions. That's what the Ontario government did, and dramatically reduced their emissions. So it seems to me that let's argue for ways that we can be environmentally responsible and make money from it, rather than we're going to be environmentally responsible by lowering everybody's standards of living, because you can't make that argument. Now, as for, look, it's the NDP in BC, it's ideological. But on that front, Carney does have levers. What does BC want? There must be, there must be things that EB would love to get going. Well, okay, we did something good for Alberta. Let's do something for British Columbia. That's how the country is supposed to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, there will be, there's a faction in the Liberal Party that are nervous about this, opposed to this, yada, yada. But they need to remember that the only reason they're in power is because of Mark Carney. They were going down to a historic defeat under Trudeau. And then, of course, the other big factor was Trump and all that stuff. But Carney's he's got agency here. He saved them. And so I hope when that stuff starts around the table that he would be reasonable and talk about, look, we're going to do this responsibly. We're going to lower emissions, all those things. But at the end of the day, I'm the prime minister and I want it done. And I've sort of been delighted to read all these stories that Mark Carney is a very impatient person. He's a tough boss. He wants things done. He has no patience for cabinet ministers who aren't fully briefed when they come to the table. Yeah, that's good. That's the kind of leader we want.
Brian, last word to you. Just in terms of a timeline, what are we looking at realistically with all the consultations and all the different parties that have to come to the table to agree? What is there any semblance of a timeline?
Well, it definitely starts shrinking it down, and it talks about, there's several different timelines, things starting in April, things timed out all the way to 2040, 2050, but moving the pipeline forward it should start rather quickly, including those trilateral discussions, the federal government, the BC government, the Alberta government, all sitting down together, also talking to Indigenous groups along the way. And so I think that within a year, we will be seeing real progress on this. That is my hope. Again, I can't stress enough that this is a win for Danielle Smith. David Eby might be really upset, but he's a member of what former NDP Premier of British Columbia, John Horgan, used to call the Mud Hut Brigade wing of the NDP. And nobody wants to live in a mud hut other than perhaps David Eby and Elizabeth May and Stephen Guilbeault. Well, they're going to enjoy a higher standard of living due to this. That's a good thing.
Well, this could truly be Canada's first nation-building exercise we've seen in decades. Will it actually happen? Can we get the pipeline built? Time will tell. Well, let us know what you think in the comments below, and like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and go to thetorontosun.com. You'll find commentary and coverage there you will not find anywhere else.